Recently, the Institute for the Study of War, ASW, commented on March 13 that the Russian Ministry of Defense has the ability to use the attack on the Ukrainian city of Bakhmut to weaken the Wagner forces and at the same time undermine the position of group leader Yevgeny Prigozhin. The ISW reported that the pace of the Russian advance slowed after Ukraine withdrew its troops from the east of the city around March 7. The ISW assessed that the Russian Defense Ministry is capable of seizing this opportunity to take advantage of the weakening of both elite forces and Wagner prisoners in Bakhmut to reduce Prigozhin's influence in the Kremlin. The ISW added that the Defense Ministry had increasingly limited Mr. Prigozhin's ability to recruit prisoners and supply ammunition. Prigozhin often refers to the tension in his relationship with the Russian Defense Ministry. Recently, Sky News quoted a political expert from Manyuth University as saying that Oleg Shcheprina said that Russian President Vladimir Putin had miscalculated about the brutal war in Ukraine today. In his 2021 essay, titled On the Historical Unity of Russians and Ukrainians, Putin mentioned that the histories of Russia and Ukraine are closely related. But according to Sky News, the essay confirmed Putin's frustration with the collapse of the Soviet Union and raised concerns about what he had planned. So what ultimately led many to think that the Russian leader had miscalculated? The first is the rejection of Ukraine's independence. Oleg Shcheprina, a PhD student at the Center for European and Eurasian Studies at the University of Maynooth, has pointed out that Putin is wrong to believe that an independent Ukraine was created artificially by the West to weaken and divide Russia. Shcheprina claimed that the denial of Ukraine's national identity led Putin to believe that the Ukrainians would not organize serious defense against the onslaught of Russian forces. Second, think that the Ukrainian army is weak. Shcheprina wrote, the Kremlin believed that the Ukrainian army was weak and assumed that the Ukrainian army would only be able to resist for a few days, or even hours, but instead, Ukrainian men queued for hours at recruitment centers to join the army and defend the country. Third, do not prepare for battle. Shcheprina asserted that when Russian troops entered Ukraine via Belarus last year, they were not prepared for the war ahead. Shcheprina noted that in the first 6 months of the war, Russia lost at least half of its professional troops, and that attacks on civilian infrastructure didn't achieve the Kremlin's goals. Fourth, the alignment of the West. Shcheprina explained that the economic, political, and diplomatic support that the West has given Ukraine is unprecedented, especially in terms of the supply of weapons and ammunition. He added, it is important that the Ukrainians have the will because they have no choice but to fight until they win. Shcheprina's arguments show that the Kremlin miscalculated when it started its operation in Ukraine. Shcheprina also said that there are currently no signs that the Kremlin will withdraw its troops from Ukraine anytime soon. Meanwhile, according to Ukrainian officials and an independent Russian prison watchdog, Moscow is aiming to recruit female prisoners to serve in the Russian military in order to make up for the losses. Growing in Ukraine. The Ukrainian Defense Ministry said in an update published yesterday that last week, a train transporting prisoners was detected moving towards the Donetsk region. There are female prisoners in the carriages. Olga Romanova, co-founder of prisoners' rights organization Russia Behind Bars, confirmed this statement. According to the organization, up to 100 female prisoners are believed to have been transferred to the battlefield in Ukraine, although it remains unclear whether the recruitment was done on a voluntary basis. In February, Ukrainian military officials said Russia had recruited 50 female prisoners from an area the Russian-occupied city of Snizhny in the Donetsk region. They said the recruits were sent to train in Russia before being sent back to Ukraine to fight. The Russian Defense Ministry has not yet commented on this information. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov on March 13 said that the idea of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to consider changing Russia's name to Moscovia is a nonsense and ridiculous thing. Asked about the proposal, Peskov said, "If I'm not mistaken, there have been a lot of jokes surrounding this incident. I can only accept it with a smile. Russia will remain a great country, no matter what anyone calls Russia, Russia will remain Russia." The idea to change the name originated from the controversy about who is the descendant of Kievan Rus. According to RT, the name Kievan Rus was coined by Russian historians in the 19th century to describe an alliance of Slavic principalities that existed from the late 9th to the mid-13th centuries, along trade routes. Trade linking the Byzantine Empire with Northern Europe. There are arguments that the name Russia, is both implied and related to Kievan Rus, from which Russia claims that both Russia and Ukraine are derived. However, many Ukrainians insist that Ukraine is the sole heir state of Kievan Rus. The name Moscovia dates back to the time of the Grand Duchy of Moscow, and was historically used by some authors to describe the Russian state. Last November, a petition was submitted to the Ukrainian government website, calling for the use of Moscovia as Federal of Moscovia instead of Russia and Russian Federation. The petition has already garnered more than 25,000 signatures. Zelensky later said that the proposal should be considered carefully. Regarding the grain deal in the Black Sea between Russia and Ukraine, recently Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Vershinin said that Moscow has no objection to extending this agreement. The statement was made by the diplomat after talks in Geneva with representatives of the United Nations on March 13. Deputy Minister Vershinin told reporters, recognizing the comprehensiveness of the agreements proposed by United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, Russia agreed to extend the Black Sea Grain Initiative for another 60 days after the following 60 days when it expires on March 18. Grain deal brokered by the United Nations and Turkey, agreed to be signed by Russia and Ukraine on July 22, 2022. The deal is for 120 days and will be extended for another 120 days in November. Last year, Russia unilaterally suspended the agreement, saying that its export conditions were not met. According to Reuters, Russian agricultural exports are not included in Western sanctions. However, Russia restricts payment methods, supply chains and insurance. This has become a barrier for their own grain and fertilizer exports. In a video recently posted by former Deputy Minister of the Interior Ministry of Ukraine, Anton Gashenko, Margarita Simonia, editor-in-chief of Russia's RT station, strongly stated that, Russia will defeat the whole of the West. Speaking during a conference on state television, Simonyan said that now some people are calling the crisis in Ukraine a military operation, while others consider it war. But according to her, there is not much difference between the two descriptions. The Russian journalist asserted that Ukraine was defeated in the first 2 or 3 days of the conflict, and since then, Russia is fighting with the West, including both NATO and non-NATO countries. Therefore, the current war on Ukrainian territory is essentially a confrontation between Russia and NATO, and Simonia stressed. Moscow has repeatedly mentioned NATO as a party deeply involved in the war in Ukraine. Late last month, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said, "Their intelligence forces are working against us 24 hours a day. They provide free weapons for Ukraine to shoot at our army." However, since the outbreak of hostilities until now, NATO has always insisted that the alliance is not a party to the conflict. The Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, SIPRI, reported on Monday. The US and EU's extensive military aid to Kyiv amid its ongoing conflict with Moscow made Ukraine the third largest importer of major arms in 2022, accounting for some 2% of global arms imports, the think tank found. Ukraine also ranked as the 14th largest weapons importer in the world for the 5-year period between 2018 and 2022, while the global level of international arms transfers has fallen by 5.1% in the past 5 years. SIPRI also reported that imports of arms by European states saw a sharp increase of 47%, while European NATO states increased their weapon imports by 65% amid a perceived threat from Russia. Meanwhile, Asia and Oceania accounted for 41% of arms deliveries in 2018 to 2022, with countries like India, Australia, China, South Korea, Pakistan and Japan landing in the top 10 of global arms importers. Westman explained that the increased demand is being driven by a perceived growing threat from China and North Korea. Russia and the US have remained the biggest weapons exporters in the world, although Moscow's share of arms sales reportedly fell from 22% to 16%, while Washington's share saw an increase from 33% to 40%. Also, between 2018 and 2022, US arms sales grew by 14%, while Russia's sales fell by 31%. Serbian Economy Minister Rade Basta said on March 13 that Serbia should join the US and EU sanctions against Russia because it is facing unbearable pressure from the West. The Serbian government quickly condemned Basta's comments, while a member of the ruling coalition demanded his resignation. Specifically, Basta announced on Twitter and Instagram that, "Our country has paid a heavy price for not sanctioning Russia. I support sanctions against Russia and I have full confidence in President Alexander Vucic's safeguards the state and national interests. That's why I ask all the other ministers and the cabinet makes a decision on this matter." In response to Basta, Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said, "This is a strange situation. The US is pressuring Serbia, and a Serbian minister has started calling for sanctions against Russia. She added, "Unlike the US, Russia has always respected Serbia and its people. This is not only a historical fact, but also a self-evident truth. If Serbia imposes sanctions against Russia, US pressure on Serbia will not end but only increase." The ruling party in parliament was quick to dismiss Basta's comments. Dragan Marković Palma, president of the Serbian League Party, said Serbia is against sanctions and its position is that the conflict in Ukraine should end immediately. On the table, during his regular press conference on March 14, Chief Cabinet Secretary Hirokazu Matsuno said that North Korea could step up its moves further, including launching missiles and conducting nuclear tests. Matsuno's comments came after North Korea launched 2 short-range ballistic missile launches off its East Coast on the same day on March 14. "We will continue to work closely with the United States and South Korea, collect and analyze the necessary information, and remain vigilant and monitor the situation to take all possible measures to maintain national peace and security." Matsuno said the South Korean Joint Chiefs of Staff said the North Korean missiles were fired at around 7:40 a.m. local time from South Gyeonggi Province, near the west coast of the country. On March 13, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said he had accepted the invitation of US President Joe Biden to visit Washington in June. Information posted by Reuters. "I am very pleased to accept the invitation of President Biden," Prime Minister Sunak told reporters in the city of San Diego, USA, where he had a meeting with the US leader, Biden, and his Australian counterpart Anthony Albanese to announce an agreement to supply Australia with nuclear-powered submarines, worth $368 billion Australian dollars. Also in his speech, the British leader also mentioned the debate on illegal migration taking place in the British Parliament. Mr. Sunak's government last week unveiled legislation aimed at stemming the flow of people crossing the English Channel by small boat to the UK, including a ban on illegal immigrants entering the UK from being granted asylum and not being granted asylum the right to enter the UK later. But some human rights groups say the measure is impractical and criminalizes the efforts of thousands of migrants. "I believe our bill is a solution to stop the flow of migrants crossing the sea. This is a complex issue that cannot be solved overnight." Last year, 45,000 people crossed the border to Britain in small boats across the English Channel. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador on March 13 rejected U.S. criticism of security after the deadly kidnapping incident near the U.S.-Mexico border this month that left 2 Americans die. At the same time, Obrador also affirmed that Mexico is safer than the U.S. The March 3 abduction of 4 Americans in the Mexican city of Matamoros was thoroughly covered by the U.S. media. Many American politicians have voiced their criticism, especially Republicans. Earlier, Mexican authorities said they had found the victim and announced that 2 of them had died. 5 members of the Mexican drug cartel were also arrested for the kidnapping. Mexico is safer than the U.S., Obrador told reporters at a news conference. "There is no problem with moving around Mexico." At the same time, blamed the anti-Mexico campaign of American politicians around security issues. The U.S. Embassy in Mexico did not comment on Obrador's comments. Former U.S. President Donald Trump commented on the bankruptcy of a series of large banks in the U.S. up to now. In addition to Silicon Valley Bank, SVB, 2 other banks have declared bankruptcy. The total capitalization of these banks is estimated at $500 billion. In his latest statement, Trump affirmed that U.S. President Joe Biden will remain in American history as the second Herbert Hoover. Herbert Hoover, former U.S. president and the man who led the U.S. in the Great Depression of 1929, Trump said, "Based on what is happening with our economy, we can say that Joe Biden is a modern-day Herbert Hoover, and we are getting closer and closer to the Great Recession, which will be much worse than 1929. There are signs of this as a number of banks have gone bankrupt shortly." Earlier, incumbent U.S. President Joe Biden said in advance that there is no reason to be seriously worried. According to him, American citizens and businesses will certainly be supported and their bank deposits will be guaranteed. Notably, after Biden's speech, the third U.S. bank boomed. At the same time, share prices of European banks went down. Switzerland's largest bank immediately lost 11% of its capitalization, the largest drop in stock prices in the bank's history. In Monterey County, Central California, USA, the communities here are now like ghost towns, in floodwaters up to several meters deep. Flooding occurred after a levee on the Pajaro River near the city of Watsonville broke. Homes, businesses, schools, and vehicles were submerged in the water, forcing thousands of residents in the area to evacuate. This is one of the consequences of a string of winter storms that hit California in recent times. According to the National Weather Service, another atmospheric river will make landfall in California, forecast to bring between 8 and 18 centimeters of rain in the already flooded state. Pajaro Valley is a coastal agricultural area famous for its produce and fruits such as strawberries, apples, broccoli, soups, and artichokes. Some brands such as Martinelli's Juice or the strawberry distribution company Driscoll's Strawberry have their headquarters here. According to Reuters, Argentine authorities on March 13 successfully controlled a forest fire raging in Ituzaingó province, northeast of this country. This is considered the largest fire in Argentina since the beginning of the year, with about 3,000 hectares of forest burned. Photos taken by witnesses earlier showed that the fire broke out violently without control, with black smoke billowing, covering the entire area. Vehicles passing through this place must move slowly due to obstruction of vision. The fire brigade and police made efforts to extinguish the fire with the support of 2 firefighting planes. Fortunately, there were no reports of damage to people or civilian property. Currently, Argentina as well as South America is facing a severe heat wave. Over the weekend, Argentina's capital Buenos Aires and Uruguay's Mercedes City recorded their highest ever March temperatures of 38.6 degrees Celsius and 48 degrees Celsius, respectively. Reuters reported that on March 13, countries in southern Africa, Mozambique and Malawi, conducted damage statistics after the destructive Storm Freddy, which caused more than 100 people were killed and many others were injured. On March 13, the search for victims continued in the Malawi city of Blantyre, after Tropical Storm Freddy swept the area for the second time in a month. One rescue worker said, "So far, we have found 30 bodies, and we are still searching for the victims." According to Doctors Without Borders, at least 60 people who died were taken to the Central Hospital in Blantyre. Another 200 injured are being treated. Survivors said they felt the excruciating pain of the loss. Freddy was one of the strongest storms ever recorded in the Southern Hemisphere. According to the World Meteorological Organization, this could be the longest-lasting tropical storm ever. It swept Mozambique on March 11, before heading towards Malawi with torrential rains, triggering landslides. The total death toll from Hurricane Freddy in Mozambique, Malawi and Madagascar, since it first made landfall last month, is about 136. Warnings for waterborne diseases, as well as cholera outbreaks, have been issued. According to Reuters, the East African country, Rwanda, is currently rushing to prepare for the organization of the FIFA World Cup, scheduled to take place this Saturday, March 16. Rwanda's capital Kigali is honored to host the 73rd Congress of the world's largest football governing body. Billboards promoting the event are being put up throughout the city. Other preparatory work was also urgently completed. The FIFA Congress will be held at the BK Arena. Built and completed in 2019 with a capacity of 10,000 seats, this is the largest arena in Rwanda as well as in East Africa, located next to Amahoro Stadium. BK Arena has hosted many continental sporting events, including the African Basketball Championship or the African Nations Volleyball Championship in 2021. The upcoming 73rd FIFA Congress in Rwanda will also mark the official start of the third term of FIFA President Gianni Infantino. According to FIFA's announcement last year, Infantino was the only person to apply for the position of FIFA President for the 2023 to 2027 term. Gianni Infantino first took over as FIFA President in 2016 for a 3-year term, replacing Sepp Blatter, who was banned from football for 6 years due to corruption allegations. He was re-elected in 2019. The 52-year-old has dual Swiss and Italian citizenship and has taken a huge step forward in his career, going from UEFA Secretary General to becoming one of the most powerful people in world sport. He is the one who directs and closely supervises the process of expanding the number of teams participating in the World Cup to 48 since the 2026 World Cup, an event co-hosted by Canada, Mexico and the United States. Midfielder Jennifer Maratson of the German women's national football team recently announced his retirement from international competition. The decision was made by the 30-year-old female midfielder just 4 months before the start of the Women's World Cup. On March 13, Maratson announced that she had retired due to a cruciate ligament injury in the match between Germany and Serbia in April last year in the framework of the World Cup qualifier. In a statement, she said, "It is the right thing to retire from the national team. I think I'm too much for international tournaments." Maratson won the 2013 European Championship with the German women's team. She was also the hero who scored the winning goal to help Germany beat Sweden 2-1, thereby winning the first Olympic title in 2016. At club level, the German midfielder owns 5 Champions League titles, of which 4 are with the club she currently plays for, Olympique Lyonnais, France, and 1 with FFC Frankfurt. Maratson made her debut for the national team in October 2010. She scored a total of 33 goals in an international career that spanned 13. Maratson will have his 112th and final match under the national shirt on April 11, against Brazil. Recently, the wedding of Princess Iman, the eldest daughter of the King of Jordan with a financier of Greek origin, took place at the Royal Palace of Jordan. Many people can't help but wipe before the beautiful fairy-like pictures in the wedding ceremony. Princess Iman, 26 years old, wore a gorgeous wedding dress with lace bodice and sleeves, a diamond tiara and a long veil on her head. She was led by her brother, Crown Prince Hussein bin Abdullah, through the gardens of Beit al-Erdin Palace into the aisle. Then, the princess and her groom Jamil Alexander Thermiotis, 28 years old, read a passage of the Quran after signing the marriage document in the presence of Jordan's king, Abdullah. The ceremony was partially televised, attended by members of the royal family and friends of the two families. Queen Rania, the bride's mother, shared in a post on social media that, "Congratulations dear daughter Iman, your smile has always been a gift of love that I cherish from the moment you were born. I hope you too are always happy in a life filled with laughter." The couple's engagement was announced last summer, but the princess and her husband only set a wedding date last week. In the near future, the Jordanian royal family will have another wedding ceremony between Crown Prince Hussein and Rajwa Al Saif, the youngest daughter of Arab businessman Khaled Al Saif, on June 1.